Hello. Myself and some others are going to give you a report about the recently concluded Iowa Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. Every year, all of the clergy, active clergy and retired clergy, along with laity, delegates from every local church in Iowa, gather in Des Moines for our legislative session. And so we did all the normal things that we do down there. We came together and we worshiped. We approved candidates for ministry. We ordained them. We had a retirement service. We had a worship service for pastors who've died in the last year. We had a time of closing churches, closing 8 churches. We did all the things that we usually do when we come together at annual conference, including passing a budget and funding all of the different ministry plans in the Iowa Annual Conference. As well, we argued about resolutions. We take stances officially as an Iowa Annual Conference so that the lobbyists that we hire, we actually have about $60,000 that's used in the Iowa Annual Conference for advocates, legislative advocates that lobby our legislators. And so we argued about resolutions about abolishing ICE and firearm safety and climate change and the disapproval of the traditional plan. So we did all those things, but this was a difficult conference this year. This annual conference session, we met from Friday night until Tuesday afternoon, was very much influenced by General Conference 2019 in St. Louis and General Conference 2020 coming up will be held in Minneapolis. It influenced it. And one of the things that I observed after around 30 annual conferences is that this is the first annual conference I've ever been a part of where we were absolutely, clearly, bold, bright line divided by one issue. And so we were divided on the issue of same-sex marriage and the ordination of gay and lesbian people to be pastors in the United Methodist Church. And there really is no middle ground anymore, is my sense at this annual conference. You either are for that or you are against it. And once upon a time, there were many folks like myself that would have been in the middle and centrists or moderates and said, we have other things to talk about. But those days are gone. And so what General Conference 2019 led to was also block voting. Block voting is kind of like a party line vote. And so what we saw down in Des Moines was a highly, highly organized effort to do block voting on the more progressive side, what we think of as more of the simple plan side, to go back to General Conference 19. And so those folks were united, and they elected the 6 General Conference clergy delegates, 6 General Conference laity delegates with a solid block vote, primarily on that one issue, and that is to reverse or turn back some of the punitive things that the traditional plan that was passed in St. Louis contains. So it was a highly divisive conference. And again, most votes fell along those party lines, if you will, including the vote to sell Camp Pictured Rocks. After a good spirited arguments by myself and Becky and some others, the conference did vote to sell that camp. And you could certainly see the party line vote. So it was a difficult conference. We passed the things that we needed to pass. The thing that we should have talked about, that we need to talk about, is the fact that in the last 5 years, we have lost 8,000 people average attendance. So we now, in 2018, we have 44,000 United Methodists across Iowa worshiping every Sunday, 44,000. We've lost 8,000 in 5 years. We need to talk about that, because in another 5 years, if that trend continues, who's going to be left? And in 9 years, who's going to be left? Those are the things that we as a conference need to talk about. I'm going to turn this over to Alec and to Terry and to Becky, and they'll share some of their thoughts. Thank you.
Here's a brief synopsis of my time at annual conference. Friday night, we had laity and clergy sessions where we separated and went to different sessions. The session I went to was on camps with Brian Johnson. I was able to speak a little bit about the camp and urging people to vote to keep the camp. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we voted on general conference and jurisdictional conference delegates, and 9 delegates were elected at once. So this was unprecedented, and it gave us a lot more time to discuss legislation throughout the weekend. Saturday afternoon, we attended teaching sessions. I went to the one on mental health, where the speaker encouraged us to reach out to people in our congregation who might have depression, anxiety, different things that they might be dealing with that are kind of hard to talk about and that we don't talk about as much, not as counselors, but just to come alongside people to listen and encourage and support them. We studied and discussed and approved the Iowa Annual Conference budget for 2020 for the 3 areas of giving, like general conference, apportionments, conference ministries, and conference mission. Some of my reflections on the annual conference was that it was an arduous and imperfect process. We seemed to spend a lot of our time, our legislative time, discussing social justice issues, and many people made speeches imploring us to pay our apportionments. And I was extremely disappointed in the short-sightedness and lack of vision for our camp and what to do with that and what to do with our shortfall of money. Frankly, I was a little shocked that people didn't see the value of this holy ground that God gave us for the purposes of bringing people to Him. I'd lastly like to thank Pastor Tom and Alec for being there and for explaining the process and the proceedings and for helping us understand what was going on, because at times it can be kind of confusing. And I really enjoyed getting to know Terry and John and Alec and Pastor Tom a little bit better as we were serving you. And it was an honor to be representing you, and it was an honor to be there to serve.
This was my first year at annual conference. I felt privileged to have gone and represented Grandview. The room was filled with over 2,000 lay pastors, and retired pastors. Even though I knew I would be voting, I was struck by how political it was. We voted on and passed 28 action items. An additional 11 action items were tabled for further discussion. The tabled items were discussed by those on both sides of the table. Of the 11 items debated, 7 passed with amendments to the original language and 3 failed. When the vote to sell pictured rocks passed, the spirit of our entire table plummeted. One of the items up for debate was closing the Iowa Drone Center. I felt it was very meaningful when a woman whose ex-husband works at the National Guard spoke. She stated the Guard studies what other countries are doing so they will be prepared in case of an attack. She noted that all countries use drones as part of their military. She emphasized the Guard studies for national security, and it is not manning drones with weapons to target other countries. Their work to study strategic points used in other countries is for the safety of American citizens. This item was defeated. There were many speeches to listen to. One was where Heifer International celebrated their 75th anniversary and spoke on their history and mission. We also heard about United Methodist Mission celebrating their 200-year anniversary and United Methodist Women celebrating 150 years. Ron Turner asked for information on connecting your church to the world, making missions exciting to the local church. After the ladies' session on Friday evening, there were 4 mini workshops, and I chose the one on missions so I could gather information for Ron. I found more information in a room the conference set aside so mission and other special interest groups could have a booth and display information and talk on their passions. It quickly became apparent to me of Pastor Tom's leadership behind the scenes. He didn't have to go to the microphone multiple times like some did, but was influential and provided valuable education to many. He is well known and respected at the conference. Tom introduced me to Mike Morgan, pastor of the United Marian Methodist Church. Pastor Mike gave me a packet on a women's conference their church was holding Saturday, April 12th. I'm very excited about this conference and will be organizing a women's outing. The speaker will be Margaret Gingberg. I love this quote from her bio. Margaret spends most mornings with her good friend, coffee and God. Without coffee, mornings would be difficult. Without God, life would be impossible. Conference was a great time to work and grow friendships with John from the Wesley and Central Grove Church, and Becky Speck, Alec, and Pastor Tom. We even had 2 nights that we were able to eat outside of Hy-Vee Hall.
Hi, Grandview. Excited to share with you a few things that happened at the Iowa Annual Conference this year in Des Moines. Blessed that it was my 11th year to be there, and it was wonderful to be there with our Grandview contingency of the people here from Grandview. So for me, it was a difficult conference that was just some relationships that were strained by, as Pastor Tom talked about, some differing opinions on things, and instead of looking at the commonality that we all have in Jesus Christ. So we were able to do a lot of work down there, including hearing some statistics. As Pastor Tom shared, we've, in the past 5 years, lost about 8,000 members in worship, average attenders. Yet the great thing is, for Grandview, that has not been true here, that we've been able to maintain and grow in the midst of that. Some other statistics just to share with you, if you're interested. We lost about 3,000 in spiritual formation over the last year, so that's people involved in things like our cell groups or Sunday school classes. So over the state of Iowa, they've lost about 3,000 people with that. And the biggest conversation that went throughout the whole conference was money. Whether we like it or not, it costs money to do ministry, as we know and hear here at Grandview. But it's not always as perfectly concise down there. And so we really looked at what the money's going to. And there are some cuts, as we know. Pictured Rocks was a big one of those, as well as a few other of our ministry areas are seeing some of those cuts to a budget that we're noticing that the money's not coming in, and eventually, slowly, we're understanding as an Iowa conference that means we can't give as much money out. So there's always good news in all this, though. Grandview is a wonderful beacon of light down at conference in the midst of what can sometimes be a little sad and down. So I thank you again for the opportunity, and am blessed to be able to be part of it.
Here's the good news. Here at Grandview, we can put our time, effort, and energy into being the Christian community in Dubuque, Iowa. We are Grandview United Methodist Church. In spite of some of the legislative things, and in spite of some of the politics, in spite of the divisions, that doesn't have to be us. It doesn't have to be us.